Welcome to the Sri Lankan Understanding, a platform on which we explore the past, present and future of Sri Lanka, an island in the Indian Ocean. We look at the opportunities and potential in the years ahead. On this episode, we're talking about the diversification of early education in Sri Lanka and the potential for it. Our guest today is a SIM certified marketer with an MBA from the University of Wales. She's currently Director Sales and Marketing at Javana Graphics, which is the manufacturing company of the very famous Panther brand. Mohanthi Atukorala, Seneviratne. Thank you, Mohanthi, for joining us on the Sri Lankan Understanding.
Hi, George.
Mohanthi, when we talk about education, toys, you talk about toys, you come from an industry in which it's toys. It's a niche. It's not something that is done on a large scale. It's also relatively new in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
We've been talking about books for children, we've been talking about focusing on that area. But when you look at diversification of the industry or the gradual growth of it, you've been involved, you're a second generation person who's involved in this particular field now. How did this niche actually start?
I think basically it started with my father, who was, we initially started with manufacturing stationery, and then we moved. He realized that there was an opening for this educational toy market, and actually when you look at it, most of the educational toys that we do is made out of paper and board. So he thought that it would be a good idea to import it from India, because Sri Lanka didn't have that many products then, and we saw potential. So he saw that Sri Lankan children need a little bit more, something to bring out creativity, to help their education, because it was not all about learning from books. So he brought in a few samples and he saw what they had done, and all these puzzles and these game boards all made out of paper and board. Similar raw materials to what he was using at the time when he was doing his stationery business. And when he realized that we could develop these products here in a way that it was suitable for the Sri Lankan child, where we could bring it out, bring out products in Sinhalese and in Tamil and also in English, he thought it was a good place to start. So that's where we started from, and we understood that learning a language didn't necessarily need to be coming from a book. You could put pieces together and make words, build puzzles, tell your stories, bring out your creativity in a child. So that's basically where we started from.
If I were to ask you, why has this element become very relevant today?
Yeah.
It has been around for some time now. You
Yeah.
talked about how we go back a few decades when this industry started.
Yeah.
But how is this supplementing mainstream education in schools?
Right, because I think nowadays children need a little bit of extra help, and children are exposed to a lot of different things with, you know, devices and things coming out, but you need to start, because there's always the ages of 3 to 5 is the most crucial for a child, and if they don't learn basic things like learning to hold a pencil by the age of 5, thereafter the teachers that we work with will always say it's very difficult to teach them to hold a pencil after that. So when you have these kind of products, it's not only just putting a picture together, but a child is learning hand-eye coordination, is learning to put colors together, learning to organize their spaces, because if you have a puzzle, you look for the similar pieces, you put it together, you need to organize things, and these are things that help you in the future. And you know, as you get into school, and if you need to organize how you do things, so that is where.
So when you have now introduced something relatively unique into the Sri Lankan market, but of course we also understand that there have been foreign products in the country already.
Yeah.
I mean, when we go back to the 80s or the 70s, there might have been products that were imported from the West, maybe from the UK, from America. There would have been something along those lines. But there's something unique about Sri Lanka in terms of the products that, for example, you are manufacturing and what we are seeing on the market, which is coming out now, for the Sri Lankan child.
Yes.
This is where it is a product that is probably targeted to a particular audience. It's not a general product that is coming out on the world market.
Correct, yeah.
How does that work? You talked about languages also coming in.
Yes, so also when we develop these products, we look at trying to bring in, for example, puzzles that we develop, we try to bring in images of Sigiriya. So the children learn about, because it's not only the world that you're looking at, you're not looking at, internationally, the wonders of the world. You've got places like Sigiriya. So if we bring in animal puzzles, we try to bring in the leopard, who children are more, they can connect with in Sri Lanka, because these are not animals they haven't seen. They see it if you travel to Yala or any of the wildlife sanctuaries in Sri Lanka. So what we do is, what they see, we bring it back and we develop products so that they're able to connect with what they have seen, and they learn, and there's so much more that's happening with them when they're putting these puzzles together and learning to do these things.
Are you seeing a response? What is the degree of, have you conducted a survey in terms of understanding where your products are going to, what impact they are having?
Okay.
This is right throughout Sri Lanka, I presume, in terms of the diversification of it. But what has been the reception you have received?
So I think in Sri Lanka at the moment, in certain areas, it's a fairly new market, because people are still understanding the benefits of these products. Because like I said earlier, it's not only a book that you can learn from. There's so much more. We have products which help children to bring out the creativity. Like we have sand products with colored sand. And also there are places where we have realized nowadays children, when it comes to learning, there are some learning disabilities that they have. So our products, we know that lots of doctors use these products, because one thing is, because it's developed in Sri Lanka, the price point is much more affordable than the products that come from overseas. And what we do is, we try to maintain products which are developed overseas. We bring those designs here and make it suitable for the Sri Lankan market. Lots of parents have now understood the benefits of these parents, and they look for these things. So they understand that learning doesn't only come from a book. You can play with puzzles, you can play with magnets, you can play with sand, and so many other things. Having said that, these products also come with some sort of a standard. So you have to have those standards when you're developing products for children, because it's very important that if they put something in their mouth, it's non-toxic. So those standards also have to be maintained when.
And that's a point I want to come to in our next segment. When we return on the next segment of this episode of the Sri Lankan Understanding, we're talking about diversifying early education and looking at the potential for Sri Lanka. Welcome back to the Sri Lankan Understanding. Mohanthi, before we went to the break, you talked about how this niche was created in Sri Lanka. As second generation, your father started this industry, how it has gradually evolved now. But of course, with a process of evolution, there are also issues that come up. There are challenges. You started talking about the safety factor.
Yeah.
We saw some years ago, about October of that year, Christmas sales were coming up in the West. Several products that were coming out of China into that Western market were suddenly halted from being distributed, because they talked about how toxic paint had been used.
Yeah.
Now, how are you overcoming challenges of that nature? You've got to be very mindful of maintaining standards, but then you are also the trendsetter. So you've got to also set this bar very high for yourself in that process.
Yeah.
How is that happening? Could you talk us through that?
So I think it's very important that we have these standards for educational toys, because I think if you look at a lot of international brands, they all make sure that they have these standards, the CE standards, the EN71, or whatever standard there is required for that particular segment of the toys that you develop, whether it's plastic, paper or board. It's very important that you have those standards. So we have a particular certificate called the EN71, which is actually required if you send products to the to Europe, any country in Europe. So there's I mean that comes in many parts, but for the category that we have, that is the certification you have. So when you develop these products, you have the certification for the product, the raw materials. That means the ink, from the ink that we use, it has to be non-toxic. Even the sand, like I said, we have creative products which are developed with sand, colored sand. The sand has the certification, and also products that we have which are magnet. Even the magnet to that extent has to have the certification. So we make sure that all the raw materials that we use for our products have the EN 71. And I think it's important because you have Chinese products, like you said, that come from overseas, and the price is much lower, but whether they have this certification is questionable. So you have to pay a price to maintain those standards as well.
So I guess that's where, when you look at the market, parents in the current context are going to have multiple options. There'll be products coming from the West, there'll be products coming from the East, and we also have the homegrown products, or the indigenously produced products. And I guess that's a lot of diversity, but then once again it's purchasing power, and that's going to have a direct connection with what is being done. What are some of the main challenges? Yes, certainly maintaining standards is a challenge, undoubtedly, but what are some of the other challenges that this industry is facing at the moment for further expansion, perhaps?
Okay, so raw materials is one. It's a current crisis that we're facing at the moment, and it's very tough because as local businesses, we don't manufacture any raw materials in Sri Lanka, so we have to import close to 80 to 90% of our raw materials. So basically everything else is designed in Sri Lanka, but the product is designed, but all the raw materials have to be imported. So that is one of, I think, the biggest challenges we're facing at the moment. But also understanding that parents in Sri Lanka should also start understanding that the benefits of using educational toys. So an educational toy is not just a game or something that a child is playing with, but so much more is happening when they play with these items or use these items, these products.
Because when we look at where we are right now, from not having such products or having them at a very high cost, you now actually have them available. You have the price is relatively friendly, where you can actually go ahead and purchase it. Now, in those situations, and you have foreign products coming in where the price is much lower, how are you competing with the region? How are we doing? How is Sri Lanka faring with the region? Have we thought of, if it's raw materials, have we thought of making pulp in our own country rather than importing it? Have endeavors been made to diversify into those fields? Some of the paint maybe that you have to import into the country, is there a possibility of us manufacturing that locally? What are the opportunities that we have there? Undoubtedly it's a challenge, but every challenge has some kind of opportunity that we can draw out of it.
What we've seen is, at the moment, I think we do have a paper and board manufacturing, but I think the supply is not enough for what the country requires. But having said that, there are situations where we actually did look at, which we are doing currently at the moment, where there are a certain amount of plastic products that we need to develop when we develop these toys. So those plastic products, we've sourced it locally. So that is a good place to start. But I think still the paper, board and the other raw materials, ink again, I still think it's, I'm not really aware whether we are able to come to that place yet, because you need to have the toxic levels, and I think it has to be of a certain standard. But the plastic, yes, we are looking at places to develop that. And having said that, we also have started developing these traditional games, like the Panchakeliya, the Olindakeliya, Nerench. And those products we develop, because it's traditional Sri Lankan games, we have tried to use all the raw materials from Sri Lanka. So the wood, everything, I mean, there are little pieces and dies that you have to have with those products. So those things we have looked at, but that is a very, at the moment, a very niche market. So it's not very large scale like the other products that we develop.
But undoubtedly steps have been taken.
Yes.
So the product, the design is indigenous, and you are trying to source the products locally as well. It's obviously a long journey. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it certainly is making progress there. When we come back on the next segment of this episode, we're going to look at Sri Lanka with the region, and we're going to look at the potential for the future. Welcome back to Sri Lankan Understanding. We're in conversation with Mohanthi Atukorala, Seneviratne, and we're talking about the diversification of early education and the potential in this country. Mohanthi, you've talked about the challenges that the industry is facing. Let's go regional. How is our region doing? How is South Asia doing in terms of producing, manufacturing toys of this nature, supplementing education at an early stage? Are we in an advantageous position? Have other countries surged ahead? Where are we at the moment?
So what I think is, I think our biggest competition comes from India, because India has a lot of the licensed products which they manufacture, like the bigger brands like Fun School and Mattel and things like that, and they are ahead of us. And I think those products which they have also developed in India is also going to other countries as well. So Sri Lanka, I think to a certain extent, because we are able to maintain the standards of the designs and the quality, and when you say design, it has to be appealing to a child, because if it isn't, it's not going to work. And I think because the children nowadays are so exposed to cartoons and various channels, and they understand colors, I mean, what attracts them. So our designs have to be at that to that standard. So it's us trying to make sure that we maintain those standards when we develop the products. But also, like I said, India also, with the products coming, Indian products or Indian licensed products coming to Sri Lanka, that's also very challenging for us too.
Are we also seeing potential of getting those franchises to Sri Lanka? Is that a possibility?
Yes. So currently we have just signed up with Mattel, where we are doing 2 brands, Barbie and Hot Wheels. So we are able to develop puzzles, coloring books, activity books, various kinds of educational products under the Barbie and the Hot Wheels license. So mainly under the Mattel brand.
So there is potential. There is potential for growth in that particular sector there, especially in terms of developing something indigenous, but also being able to get the franchise.
Franchise here.
The franchise also goes to Southeast Asia.
Yes.
There must be countries in South Asia.
Yes, and also I think I must say, at the moment with the current import restrictions that we're having, we are a little benefited there, because we're able to bring in like these licensed products that we can develop. We can put it out to the market now, because we don't have the competition, that much of competition from the international brands that are coming in, because it's not that they're not coming in, but they're restricted.
During COVID, we found children stuck at home, can't go to school. Did you see this as an opportune moment to further promote products of this nature? Because like I said earlier, every challenge has some kind of opportunity. But when they're stuck at home, they've got online education to a large extent. But how do they go on to that other level? How have you seen that happening?
I think COVID taught us a really big lesson, where we had to learn how to start selling our products out to the market, because we were not visible online. We had only our basic sales channels that we did. And during COVID, we realized so many parents needed products for their children to keep them entertained, because I think the lockdowns was so unexpected. And I think that's from there we actually started our online platform of a sales channel, because we realized parents really needed products to keep their children busy, and they needed something. It was not a doll, it was not a plastic toy, because I mean, you can't play and educate someone the whole time. Mothers were looking for, you know, what are your word building, what are your coloring books, can I have the next puzzle, can I have this? So during COVID, there were so many parents who were constantly calling us and saying, you know, we need these products, can you deliver it to us? So I think we saw a huge jump in how parents really valued the educational products at that time, to understand, you know, they needed something, because there's only so much children can watch a screen for, and I mean 24 hours of the day during lockdown, that's not going to work, because I mean there were young children at the ages of 3 who were not going to school or not going to Montessori, and the parents realized that they needed to have something for these children to keep them occupied. So these educational toys were obviously the solution for that.
Mohanthi, going forward, going into the future, we're talking about hybrid forms of education. COVID's going to be around for a long time.
Yeah.
We've got to live with it, we've got to move on. We talk about economic issues in the country, we're talking about financial issues in this country, we're talking about a national crisis in Sri Lanka. When we look at education, undoubtedly education is an investment that is being made for the future.
Yeah.
Irrespective of what we are going through right now, we must always be mindful that there's hope for the future, and we have to invest heavily in education. How do you see further opportunity to diversify this field? How much more can we grow it? What more can we do? Do we need new players coming in? Do we need to think about how we are sourcing our products? We talked about imports, restrictions. Can we think of exporting our products? Can we look at selected markets out there? What opportunities do we have?
So at the moment we do some exports as well, but I think just to answer your question there, George, I think something that's really important is we have to marry technology with this. So that is something we are actually looking at with product development, where is there a way where we can, because I think a child at 2+ now understands how to use a phone or a device or any piece of technology. So in order to keep that interest going on, we need to understand how we can bring technology in with the products that we manufacture, because they are very, it's very hands-on, activity based. So if you bring in technology, what sort of developments do you do? So that is something that we're actually looking at now.
And that's why you're trying to move the child. Yes, technology is a part and parcel of the child's life, but how does the child also develop the child's motor skills, looking how we're going to expand intelligence levels.
Correct.
That's what we need to be focused on.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Mohanthi, for taking your time,
Thank
sharing
you.
about an industry that is relatively new in Sri Lanka overall, but undoubtedly an industry that is contributing very heavily to the future.
Yes.
These are investments, the results of which we will see 10, 20, 30 years down the line.
Correct.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was Mohanthi Atukorala Seneviratne speaking to us about the whole process of diversifying early education in Sri Lanka, where we can take this sector, a relatively new sector in Sri Lanka, but one which has much potential for the future. Join us again on the next episode of the Sri Lankan Understanding, when we look at another aspect of Sri Lanka. We look at the past, we look at the present, and we look at the potential for the future.